Tractor and equipment safety. Again, the Department of Industrial Relations is primarily responsible for this. And one of the main things is the rollover protection structures, or ROPS. These rollover protective structures are in place and have been in place since 1976 because it's dangerous with a tractor. You're driving next to a canal or a cutout or something, the ground gives way, the next thing the tractor rolls over, and you've killed the driver. And so tractors now have seat belts and rollover protection structures. The rollover protection structure must protect against sharp edges and corners inside the cab. So you're rolling over, it doesn't do much good to keep you from being crushed when you're being sliced to death or stabbed to death by something inside the cab. It has to be a reasonably safe environment while you're rolling. Not exactly safe, but at least from obvious hazards, batteries, fuel tanks, oil reservoirs, and cooling systems designed in such a way that they're not going to spill all over you. Again, you roll over, yay, I didn't get crushed, but I'm burning alive, covered in oil and gas or diesel. That's not very good. So again, things have to be properly protected. Tractor equipped with a canopy to protect the operator against falling objects or possibly, I'll just leave it at that, falling objects. All canopies installed after 1971 must include brush deflection guards. So you're going past a tree or brush, it flips out of the way. People have been killed by pushing a branch out of the way. Tractor moves it out of the way with ease. It snaps back and stabs the driver or smacks him upside the head and gives him a lethal head injury. You need those brush shields. And also intrusion of poles. You're driving along and something comes right in, a branch or a pole or something comes right in and stabs the driver. Rear opening must be covered with woven wire or clear polycarbonates, laminated safety glass, or some other material that's going to protect the driver. Seat belts are required whenever you have a rollover protective structure installed. Now, there are exemptions or exceptions, as you might expect. There are certain low-profile tractors used in orchards, vineyards, or hop yards inside of farm buildings or greenhouses, and they're not going to roll over. You're in an environment, they're designed in such a way you need it to be open. And its operation requires that it be open, and you're not in a rollover environment in the middle of an orchard. Tractors, while used with mounted equipment that is incompatible with ROPS, so occasionally there are pieces of equipment, corn pickers, cotton strippers, vegetable pickers, and fruit harvesters of certain types, just are incompatible in their design with a rollover protective structure. And so there is some exceptions allowed for certain equipment. Tractors, when operated as stationary power or pumping units, so they're not going anywhere. Doesn't need a rollover protective structure if it's parked and you're just using the PTO to drive something else. Next, we have lockout, blockout. These are precautions to prevent accidental re-energization or re-energizing of electrical systems or operation of mechanical systems. So a lot of people have died over the decades when they turn off a piece of equipment, go start to repair the equipment, somebody comes in and flips the on switch, not realizing somebody's working on it. Or, wow, these lights aren't working. Why aren't these lights working? Oh, the breaker box, and they turn the electricity on. And you just fried your friend who's working on some electrical thing over on the other side of the warehouse. You got to have safety precautions in order to prevent those kinds of accidents. So it's used on specialized power equipment, either because of mechanical issues or electrical issues, so you're not sucked into a machine mechanically if somebody accidentally turns it on, or electrocuted if somebody accidentally turns it on. And so these tags are provided that control the specific hazard. And there are a number of variations on these tags. And the tags in general must cite the reason for placing the tag, maintenance operation or whatever, the name and how to contact the person placing the tag, and the date the tag was placed. You don't want somebody coming in and, oh, who put this? Oh, this was Bob yesterday. He must be done by now. Turn on the electricity. You just killed Bob. Confined spaces. Oh, let me just mention, it's lockout, blockout. That means it's more than just a tag. You generally, literally put a padlock. There are power switches on commercial equipment where there's some sort of a hole where you could put a lock and you can no longer move it. So there are padlocks that are part of this. You don't accidentally push the switch when there's a padlock preventing you from moving the on switch or the activation switch. So that's the lockout part. Confined spaces, again, Department of Pesticide Regulations. There are lots of confined spaces in agriculture, from tanks used to transport all kinds of products, liquid tanks and various kinds of hoppers. There's silos, there's fermentation tanks used for making beer and wine, all kinds of things that are perhaps in need of a person going in momentarily, temporarily, to clean, to weld something, to do some work, and then get the hell out. It's not supposed to be someplace you spend a lot of time. But any space that is confined so that it, any space that is configured so that an employee can bodily enter and perform assigned work. Like I said, you're going to weld, you're going to clean, you're going to do some task inside of this confined space. Most confined spaces would be defined as confined when they have limited or restricted means for entry or exit. You might have to crawl through some portal or something to get in. They're not normal rooms or buildings. So tanks, vessels, silos, storage bins, hoppers, vaults, pits, fermentation tanks, all kinds of things. It is not designed for continuous employee occupancy. You don't set up your office in a confined space. They're dangerous. There can be atmosphere conditions where there's CO2 levels rise that can kill people, and people do die from CO2 exposure in tanks. There can be electrical hazards, strangling hazards, all kinds of things. So suffocation from atmosphere, engulfment by liquid or flowable solid. Maybe you've seen a movie or two where the bad guy gets buried in grain inside the silo and he's suffocated. Strangulation, constriction, crushing, lots of things, bad things can happen inside of these confined spaces, even explosions and fires. And you need to know what the heck you're doing and what the hazards are under those conditions. A lot of people don't realize that it doesn't have to be considered explosive to be explosive. A silo filled with grain dust is highly explosive. The dust, if it's concentrated enough, which it could be in a confined space, very likely could be in a confined space, can explode with the slightest spark. There have been numerous accidents in silos and grain mills where dust from flour manufacture has made the atmosphere just dusty enough where a spark sends the entire factory kaboom in a fireball explosion, killing anybody inside. So that kind of hazard isn't just about confined spaces when you're talking about grain dust. But there's so many different things that can go wrong. So you need to have written or printed permission to enter a confined space. You need to know what those hazards are, some sort of atmosphere problem, flammable material, airborne combustible dust that I just mentioned, atmospheric oxygen levels being below 19.5% or above 23.5%. Below 19.5 provides respiratory risks. 23.5 provides flammable risks, where normal explosion safety rules don't apply. Normal fire safety rules don't apply. When you hit 23.5, everything becomes much, much, much more flammable. Atmospheric radioactivity, not something we deal with too often in agriculture, but it can happen in certain rare situations. Atmosphere dangerous to life or health, primarily high levels of carbon dioxide, high levels of carbon monoxide, or vapors of hydrocarbons like gasoline vapors, things like that, low oxygen. Those are the things that are generally most often seen in agriculture. Exception: atmospheric concentration is not capable of causing death, incapacitation, impairment, or acute illness. So there is an exception in terms of how you handle a confined space, depending on the severity or risks involved. Now, I'm not going to go through this list. You can hit pause and read through it, but these are the list of things, general requirements involved when dealing with and working in confined spaces. It's essentially use your common sense and knowledge of your work environment and the hazards specific to the confined space that needs somebody to go in. How do you protect yourself? Definitely respirators are commonly used in confined spaces. Head protection, like some sort of helmet or hard hat, eye and face protection, hand protection, foot protection, all of the things that you might expect going into a potentially hazardous workspace. Switching gears, what about hand weeding? It used to be that hand weeding was done with the short-handled hose, and now by law, you must have long-handled hose. And it took a while for some of the older, well-established workers to get used to the idea of standing up straight, better for your back, better for your long life and career to be working in that position. But it took some retraining, and it was hard for some people to relearn how to do proper weeding. You cannot stoop down or kneel or squat to do your weeding. You can't use short-handled tools less than 48 inches long. Instead, you use long-handled tools that are at least 48 inches long. Lots of resources available on some of the organizations, the regulatory agencies discussed, as well as the Farm Employers Labor Service that I've mentioned as well. Other sources for safety issues: similar businesses. Talk to people, but talk to other businesses like yours. Talk to the equipment manufacturers. They know what is required. Part of their job is to help people use their equipment, and they want to help. Maybe you can get free training along with your equipment that you purchase, maybe training videos and materials that you can keep. Workers' compensation carriers, they don't want to be paying workers' compensation. They just want to collect your premium. They want to collect your money. They don't want to pay out their money to your injured employees. So workers' compensation, part of their job is to help you assess risks, train your employees, and make sure you're doing everything to keep your employees from becoming Cost centers. They don't want to spend money. Liability and fire insurance companies, also for the same reason, they often can help to understand and train and give you good information about safety in your working situation. Trade associations, employer groups, trade unions, National Safety Council, all of these different organizations have potentially great resources for specific situations to help your company perform in a safe manner. That is it.